Thank you. Good morning. Sounded good. Welcome to Rincon Congregational United Church of Christ here in Tucson, Arizona, and wherever you're joining us online. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Welcome to all of thou and thee. I am Seth Wispelway. I am the interim pastor here at Rincon, and unlike recent weeks, I am going to be doing this behind a KN95 mast today, but I think I sound all right. I can hear myself. I hope you can as well, because I want to tell you that here and wherever you are on life's journey, welcome. We want you to feel safe in this space. We hope that's the case. We claim a living God still speaking in our midst, the Spirit among us who loves you unconditionally. LGBTQIA, all abilities, black, brown, white, or a bit of each, man, woman, or a bit of both, older, younger, or a bit of both. Welcome. Before I jump into any and all announcements, would love to say hello to anyone who might be joining us for the first time who wants to make themselves known in such a way. We're not going to embarrass you or do anything. We do have something for you. I don't have my glasses on because usually I can spot you. All right. Well, welcome to relatively new revisitors and longtime members and friends. Why am I in a mass this week? Well, hopefully a lot of you who are on our email list saw the email that got sent by myself and on behalf of entire church leadership, but the Omicron surge of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been living for almost 2 full years now, living through, is now greatly impacting our county here in Tucson. And for the next 2 to 4 weeks, we anticipate that things are going to continue to be that much more greatly impacted. As a result, we're taking extra care. Thank you to all of y'all here being spread out and wearing medical grade masks. And for the next 3 Sundays, we are going to offer an in-person worship service option that will also continue to be online, but it will be held in our courtyard area outdoors alongside Fellowship Hall. And then after February 6th, we will reassess. Ideally, we'll be in a space where we have a greater handle on the numbers. And as ever, this is a bit of white noise for those of us here who have really taken great care in the pandemic, but just to be on the record, continue to look out for one another, be safe, be vigilant. We need each other. And get your booster shot if you haven't already. I imagine most, if not all of y'all have. I hope that's the case, but it is known to be a proven mitigant against this variant and others. So we do these things, as difficult and as frustrating as they are, to keep shifting out of our higher calling, our values that keep us safe and in life with one another. We do these things out of love. If you have any questions or concerns, though, please do reach out to us at the office, or we can connect outside after the service. Along those lines, next week's big annual meeting for our congregation is going to be held online only. You will get the information you need this week for members and friends of the congregation, the access to the annual report, the Zoom link, and for those who can't join or there might be technological issues, we can help with that, or we'll make sure your voices and opinions are counted with the matters at hand. We did it this way last year, and overall I think it worked rather well. Salud. I think that's it from me. Are there any other announcements that should come before the congregation? Okay.
I have a question, actually.
A question?
I noticed that there's 9 a.m. IPS MLK Service Day tomorrow.
Yes.
Can you enlighten?
From what I know, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Interfaith Community Services, which is based on our campus now in one of their headquarters, has an annual service day outdoors, at least that's where it's starting. I'll be saying a few words at 9 a.m. Unfortunately, I don't know too much of the particulars, but we can dig that up for you after the service. I know they have a lot of great opportunities, and they themselves are very COVID safe. So I'll be there at 9 a.m., and we'll find out together, perhaps. All right, beloved, these are ongoing trying times, but here in the space or here in this time, we have a moment to try to unclench a little bit, to breathe a little bit, and know that in God's love and in our care for one another, we do have a safety, we do have a way to keep going. So I invite you to know and remember, even for an hour, the spirit and breath that holds you. And we'll start by standing as you're able and willing in body or spirit for our call to worship.
Our Mother, Father, God, has made to be one body with many members.
United and uniting, this is our calling.
God calls us to share diverse gifts and activated by the one and same Spirit.
United and uniting, this is our redemption.
God longs for us to be united in love and to manifest the Spirit in our different ways.
United and uniting, this is our worship.
Let us gather together in this hour to offer praise and worship to our holy God, who challenges us and calls us to create the beloved community.
Flesh endures till Hades clamor to be free. In our heart we would confess that wholeness is our deed and destiny. In conflicts that destroy our health, we recognize the world's disease. In life declares our health. Is there no cure, O Christ, for these? Grant that we all made one in faith, in your community may find wholeness that enriching souls, reach and prosper you. Y'all may be seated. Beautiful organ playing, thank you. Thank you to our guest accompanist this week, who is with us, Ji-Sun. And thank you for being here on short notice. Thank you to all helping pull off these services week in and week out. We are being nimble and flexible today and tomorrow. I want to especially give acknowledgement to Dax and Chris and Margaret this week, who continue to just be fleet of foot in making this possible for all of us. If and when anyone would like to help them continue to do that, we'll have some extra work in the next few weeks, so we would love that help. That hymn may have been a little newer to some of us, but how appropriate were those lyrics? I'm telling you, that's how it's written in the hymnal. No modifications were made, and so the tune itself is lovely. I wasn't as familiar with it, but chose it for all the reasons, even before this massive surge of the past week. So maybe it can and should become a mainstay for us through this pandemic because it is a source of nourishment. Prayer can also be a source of nourishment. We're at that point where we're a little warmed up and are invited into honesty and confession about how we're doing, how we want to be doing in the world, how we may have been doing, and we come back to God at this point in the service each and every week to remember who God is to and for us as one who sees us for who we are, gets it, gives us grace and strength to keep going. It's a time to acknowledge that we don't always get it right, and there's opportunities to keep on growing, and that's also okay. I don't choose many texts and everything that talk or use the word sin, but this week has them, and it felt appropriate as we think about some of the themes that surface every year on Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. And I wanted to offer up a definition of sin that my friend David Dark, who's a religion professor in Nashville, uses. He calls sin the active flight from the lived realization of available data. I'll say that again. Sin is the active flight from the lived realization of available data. Meaning it's a choice to, in light of what is known and what is held dear and held as value, to still avoid and run away from it. Sin is the active flight from the lived realization of available data. That's something to sit with this week, and I think something too, as we wrestle with the hugeness of what's going on around us and the pandemic, and certainly different ills and ailments in our broader society, because it gives us a bit of grace, I think, possibly for those who, for example, elected leaders, don't embody perhaps the same values we need for life and God's transforming love and justice, but also gives us hope to make sure they know, hey, stop running away. There's a greater calling. All right. We will pray together, starting with, oh God, we long to co-create with you, the beloved community, which looks to the common good, privileges all equally, and creates societal systems which celebrate the humanity and the gifts of all. And yet we focus on our differences, envy each other's gifts, devalue manifestations of you, O God, that are not like our own. Perhaps our sin is a slow wait for justice. We allow the voices of human siblings who do not look like us, love like us, worship like us, to be silenced. We have told them to wait for freedom, justice, and equality, and access. In doing so, we allow a denigrating sense of nobodiness to persist for others. Or perhaps we have kept silence ourselves in the face of their struggle for full human life. For it is not solely hateful words and actions, but also appalling silence that follows the path of oppression. Perhaps our sin is to give in to weariness, discouragement, bitterness. You have called us, God, to be drum majors for justice, peace, and righteousness. Yet the work of peace and justice overwhelms us at times. To build with God the beloved community seems impossible. and we grow weary. We cry, peace, peace. But there is no peace within us or around us. We find ourselves on the path of hatred and oppression, violence and war. Take a few moments now in silence to return to the available data we have that you are loved, you are strengthened in God and community. Beloved, God is at work in us and with us. God has promised, I will not keep silent, and I will not rest until the vindication of my beloved people shines out like the dawn and their salvation like a burning torch. My people shall no more be termed forsaken, and their land shall no more be termed desolate. We remember, God, that you have given your beloved people a new name. My delight is in them. Let us thank God together. Thank you, God, for delighting in us even now, for forgiving us our slow action, our silence, and our weariness, so that we can know you and know you empower us to work with renewed vigor and commitment. Thank you, God, for inviting us once again to create with you the beloved community you long for.
Today's reading is 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 to 10. As we work together with God, we urge you not to accept the grace of God in vain. For God says, "At an acceptable time I have listened to you, and on the day of liberation I have helped you." See, now is the acceptable time. See, now is the day of liberation. We are putting no obstacle in anyone's way, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. But as servants of God, we have commended ourselves in every way, through great endurance in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights, hunger, by purity, knowledge, patience, kindness, holiness of spirit, genuine love, truthful speech, and the power of God, with the weapons of righteousness for the right hand and for the left, in honor and dishonor, in ill repute and good repute. We are treated as impostors, and yet are true, as unknown, yet are well known, as dying, and see we are alive, as impoverished, as punished, yet not killed, as sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, as poor, yet making many rich, as having nothing, and yet possessing everything.
Thank you, Michael. Will you all please pray with me? Living God and living Jesus, give us this day a sense of the community dreamed by the saints who have gone before, lived out by the saints who have gone before, and offered to all the saints here and to come, knowing that we can be those who remove obstacles to your transforming love and justice. We can see that now is always the time, that we might have the fire to know the place we hold, and manifesting the fierce urgency of now for your transforming love and justice. Thank you for being with us during this trying time. May these words and meditations of my own and all of us feel like a breath of encouragement, challenge, and life in keeping with the encouragement, challenge, and life you give us. In your name, amen. I am going to tell you a story about a woman named Connie Wick. Has anyone ever heard of Connie Wick? Well, great. We're going to learn together about Connie Wick. And I share this hoping y'all hear in it a story. I look out and I see all of y'all as people who at different times in your lives, having sat with so many of you to hear your stories, have been part of raising voice in ways that have sought and achieved God's transforming love and justice. So there are things in Connie's story that might seem like, wow, look at her. But I want you to hear the things that sit with your own story and say, like, what if that looked like us? going forward, and I think will resonate with some of these things. Because, you know, it happens when just one of a handful of people holding a placard outside the State House, or while writing the 63rd letter to the editor, or when waiting on hold to talk to a bored-sounding congressional staffer, it happens. At some point, every citizen advocate wonders, am I having an impact? Do the decision makers really know I am out here? Have you all wondered this at any point in your lives when advocating for any kind of good and justice, whether with a member of Congress, a local elected, or just trying to convince someone at the Thanksgiving table? What is the point of seeking this love and justice when it feels like I'm hitting a brick wall? Am I having an impact? Connie Wick knew the answers. In the summer of 2004, Wick wrote her umpteenth letter to Senator Richard Lugar. This time, it was in her role as a coordinator for the Bread for the World group that met at the Northwest Indianapolis retirement community, Robin Run. And a month after her umpteenth letter, this is in 2004, President Bush held a signing ceremony at the White House. And the invited guests to this particular ceremony included Senator Lugar and Bread for the World President David Beckman, my former boss. Beckman took advantage of this invite, you know, kind of afterwards, where like, let me get to the stage or podium and make sure I get a bug in the ear. He took an advantage of this White House invitation to lobby the president about the importance of full funding for what was called the Millennium Challenge account, which was designed to provide development assistance to the world's poorest countries. Bush was busy and on his way out the door, but he did hear the words, and he called over Senator Lugar, who was chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time. And he called over Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, and he asked for their help in getting the MCA funded. He also was like, here, talk to these guys. So as Lugar and Beckman walked away to continue this conversation, the senator turned to the Bread for the World president and said, you know, that's funny. I'm just now responding to a letter from a constituent, Connie Wick. Senator knew her by name. She is saying just what you're saying, that we should fully fund the Millennium Challenge account and the AIDS initiative and not cut funding for ongoing programs of assistance to poor people. And sure enough, with the help of Senator Lugar, Congress soon designated $1.5 billion in funding for that account in fiscal year 2005. And I can tell you, as someone who was working for Bread for the World that time and on all this stuff, but this story took on the status of legend among us. My purview of states as an organizer was Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. She said, that was thrilling. But really the takeaway here is when presidents and senators, presidents of organizations and the country, were meeting, what gave Senator Lugar pause, the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, was, wait, hold on a second. What does Connie Wick think about this? You don't care about the president of an NGO. Who do I have to answer to in Indiana? Right? Well, that was thrilling, Connie said. Thrilling but not unprecedented. Wick, who was 83 at the time, saw the fruits of her advocacy in the environmental, civil rights, and anti-poverty arenas for over 40 years. in the Lafayette area of Indiana, where Wick and her husband Joe lived, while Joe was pastor of First Christian Church there, Wick was best known for leading the fight to save Wildcat Creek. We have some wildcats here. She was best known not for billions in anti-poverty assistance, but for saving Wildcat Creek, an idyllic north-central Indiana tributary of the Wabash River. In the late 1960s, another touch point, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers announced a plan to dam the Wildcat and flood 28 square miles of creek bed, farms, cemeteries, and towns to create a reservoir. When Wick and others formed the Lafayette Environmental Action Federation in 1969, the reservoir appeared a done deal. The political leaders of the state and community wanted the reservoir, as did the Chamber of Commerce, of course, automatic giveaway that it was not a good thing. The local newspaper editorialized in favor of the dam. Construction companies and lawyers stood to make a lot of money. The national climate was very favorable to the project also. The Army Corps of Engineers was in the midst of a post-World War II orgy of dam building, and members of Congress had proposed flooding even the Grand Canyon. What do we think about that? The environmental argument for the benefit of rivers and streams to wildlife, fish, and the broader ecosystem was not resonating with either voters or lawmakers. So when the first president of the Lafayette Environmental Group stepped down and Wick was elected the new president, she was cautioned by other local activists. Quote, "The one thing they told me when I became president was not to monkey with the reservoir problem because it was just too big for us," she said. But Wick was not easily deterred. She had a faith in God's transforming love and justice and vision for creation. She had already defied an FBI agent who had visited her home a few years earlier to warn her off participation in the Lafayette area civil rights movement. Another touch point we'll get to when we get to King in a little bit. When she heard people were so worried about what local activists would do, the FBI is sending people to people's doors to be like, don't protest the dam. This should be like red flags for any of us. When that happens, you're like, all right, must be onto something good. But it's not going to be easy. When she heard from outdoors lovers and people who lived on family farms destined to be destroyed by the dam, Wick decided she needed to step up. Out of relationship and love of her neighbors, she decided to step up. Quote, "The environmental, sociological, and human side of this was just too much for me to stand aside." She said that. She also said that was the end of my private life for 12 years, she added with a laugh. When they began their anti-dam campaign, Wick was told by a Senate staffer that if the group wanted to be taken seriously, they would need 10,000 signatures on a petition. So they gathered 20,000. They were told personal lobbying was important as well. So Wick organized 2 bus trips to visit lawmakers in Washington. And the dam fighters got in to talk with the governor and state legislators as well. Wick and 2 other activists chased then Indiana Senator Vance Hartka around Lafayette one night, ultimately buttonholing Hartka outside a fundraiser at a private home. Remember, they work for us. This is the kind of thing that still gets called uncivil today. They held marathon strategy sessions fueled by Girl Scout cookies, taught themselves the technical aspects of dam building, and gave tours of the targeted areas to community leaders and youth groups. Quote, "We would bring them to some beautiful places and then say, 'Hold your breath, because if the dam comes, we are going to be under 60 feet of water here,'" Wick said. And then she added, "When we started making headway, the power structure kept wondering where our money came from." Remember, this is a typical aspect of power. First they ignore you, then they mock you, then they start to attack you, then they give in. When we started to make headway, the power structure kept wondering where our money came from, but we didn't have any money. We just had a lot of volunteers, a lot of hard work, and a lot of community support. Eventually, after more than a decade of struggle, so around 1980, Governor Otis Bowen and a majority of the state legislature expressed their opposition to damming the Wildcat, and federal officials backed off. "We had the votes, thanks to Connie's talent in reaching the public," said Carol Baker, who had lived for 55 years on a farm on a middle fork of Wildcat Creek. She added, "Any knowledgeable person would say, if it was not for Connie, it would have been Lake Lafayette, and there would have been an Army Corps of Engineers dam on the Wildcat." The anti-dam, which we could also say is an anti-obstacle, the anti-dam movement that started in places like Connie Wick's living room grew into a well-organized national coalition that has reversed the dam building trend. It takes an unbelievable amount of energy, commitment, and stamina to fight off an Army Corps of Engineers project, says Melissa Samet, who is the Senior Director of Water Resources for American Rivers. But there was a pretty darn big impact made by the people who stood up and said no to dams. The era of encasing rivers in concrete felt like it had passed. And the current president of what is now the Wild Creek Foundation, this is back in the mid-2000s, but wrote Wick a letter. "As I paddle the stream, I feel such a deep gratitude to you and the many others that had the vision to leave a little something for tomorrow. You are a hero to many, and you are a hero to me. Most importantly, you are a hero to the creek, to nature, and to God that resides in nature." This is a regular reminder through this sermon that Connie is any one of us. And when Joe Wick retired from the ministry, he and Connie moved to Robin Run in Indianapolis. Connie immediately joined the center's Bread for the World group and soon became its president. And I should add here, for those who are unfamiliar with Bread for the World, it's an ecumenical Christian organization that works with people of faith and conscience around the country to make an impact on our elected leaders, that they would prioritize issues of fighting hunger and poverty and AIDS. I happen to be one of their grassroots organizers for several years in the mid-2000s. So she joined that group at the retirement community and soon became its president. She led letter-writing campaigns and the delivery of symbolic loaves of bread to congressional offices. This sounds like something Rincon is about. Certainly we don't lack for the ability to deliver good baked goods in hard times. Would you agree? Both Connie and Joe have served as the president of the resident council at Robin Run, and Connie organized the center's annual election forums that have become a must for all area candidates for Congress and the State House. You better believe they vote, and if you want to go and impress some people. Connie said, I managed to lasso all of them, by hook or by crook. One of the candidates who was a regular at Connie's Rob and Run forums before she died about a decade ago was Congresswoman Julia Carson, who became close with Wick. The two women exchanged notes, calls, and visits to birthday parties. This is what Congresswoman Carson had to say about Connie. Connie always steps up when there is a need. Connie always steps up when there is a need. I think it's safe to say, having heard this inspiring story, that the only obstacles that Connie Wick saw in her life when it came to her call as a person of faith and community member, living with others in the same creation we share, the only obstacles she saw in her life were obstacles to God's transforming love and justice. And she did what she learned and knew she could do to overcome them. She wasn't being anything other than herself, which was a person of faith, a faith in God's transforming love and justice, and someone with the ability to speak out as a citizen and resident of her state and communities. God's transforming love and justice clears away all obstacles to the realizations of hope, life, and love for all people and all creation. When we say, as we do, that we are called to be the hands and feet of God here on earth, we are saying we are called to clear away all obstacles to full life and love for all people and creation. But as we've said in our prayer today, and as we felt many times in the pandemic, it gets tiring, it gets wearying, it gets frustrating. There have been dark days as an organizer for me, I'll tell you that. But it is still possible. And so I share this story as an encouragement that all of us have the ability to speak up and speak out wherever we are, wherever we live, to clear away obstacles. It usually does take more than one of us. It is done in community. And we're given two calls in our scripture, and certainly from Dr. King. One, in order to be in the active business of clearing away obstacles, we also need to make sure that we are not ourselves an obstacle. This also came up in our prayer today. It's true. I look at all of you, and I know that no one is actively fighting against the worst parts, or fighting against the best parts of God's vision and mission. But there are ways, as King says, when things are moving, and they always are, and as the saying goes, you can never be neutral on a moving train. There are ways in which we might be too slow, ways that we might need to be limbered up to make sure that we are not even accidentally in the way of God's transforming love and justice. We are called to clear obstacles, and often that times means moving with the train so that we are not in the way of the ambulances and the fire trucks that do need to get there at least to the front lines. I'm going to share a couple of examples and then close. A couple of examples of obstacles that currently exist and they're going to sound like hard challenges, but what I want you to hear is the encouragement. One is one I've brought up here in brief a few times. But I know a lot of people love the welcome. I usually say we strive to make this safe space. All are welcome. We want all to feel welcome and safe. We do. That's true. And I walk through different identities and everything just to be very specific about folks who often may not feel safe out in our wider, hateful and inaccessible society. We want to feel specifically safe in here and part of the life we say we have and want to share. We've got a very practical obstacle to being able to share in our worship life here in this sanctuary. Where I am standing is an obstacle to full participation to many differently abled people, including many current members and friends. This is just true. This is going to continue to be an obstacle I've wrestled with, and I think I'm going to continue for the next few weeks when we're outside, whether I should even continue to preach and lead worship from here when not everybody can. We say this is safe space. We say all abilities. The words need to line up with reality at some point. When is that point going to be? This is an obstacle to many, and it's going to be a growing one. I know many members know this. Who wants to match our words to an action? Who wants to make this accessible? What is more important? Our love and holding on to the visual of what was, or whether the whole beloved community of God can participate and lead worship? I hope we agree on the answer here. And here's the good news. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. Guess what? Nothing is stopping us from doing anything about this. Nothing, if we really agree that this is who we are and want to be. I talk to a lot of people who are new and interested and excited by what our vision and mission is and has to offer. But eventually people, as the very trite saying goes, want to see money where mouth is. And more money comes when we act like we believe in our own stated values. I am talking about people who I and we and y'all love dearly here, who I want to be able to participate fully in leading worship. So I say this out of love for the future and life of the church in the same way that repaving the parking lots was important. This is an obstacle, but we can get it out of the way, out of love for our fellow members. And you all know I'm on my way out this year, so I'm just like going on the record on a lot of things. But I would love to do this with you, or at least start having the conversations. I know we know what has to happen. The question is, do we actually want to make it happen? One more example, bringing it back to Connie Wick a little bit more directly. How many here can name both of our senators here, U.S. senators representing us, or at least claiming to, in Washington, D.C.? Mark Kelly, Kristen Sinema. The latter, I hope you all know, has been in the news a good bit lately. Would you all agree? I don't know that I agree for the reason she's been in the news. And don't worry, I know what I'm legally allowed to do and not do up here. Y'all, Kristen Sinema is an obstacle to a lot right now that is so crucially important for the future of this country. I am not an alarmist or overdramatic in that I get passionate about things, but I always want to have my receipts, and I'm going to push in a little bit to something where I hope I'm wrong. And I want you to call me after I'm gone, after the 2022 midterms and 2024, if I was wrong, and tell me with relief and gratitude, thank God you were wrong, Seth. I want to be wrong. But there are signs and actions and movements afoot right now, y'all, where the cost of being wrong about what I'm about to say is exponentially less than the cost of being right. So I'm willing to take that risk. And it's not just about one person, but I'm speaking to us now as Arizonans, with a senator who is blocking the life-giving and crucially important enfranchisement of our fellow citizens nationwide. This would be a profane scandal staining the memory of Dr. King any given year. But right now, with what we've been through in the past 5 years, and what is afoot in gerrymandering, white supremacist efforts to restrict the ballot box enormously from people of color and more, to enshrine white patriarchal minority rule, we have the receipts on this. This is what's been happening. Everyone's hopefully kept up a little bit with this over the past couple years. We are at a dangerous moment if there isn't some fight. And fight, I hope you feel encouraged from the story of Connie Wick, can look like a lot of things. Anyone can fight. It's about building it all together. There are many different ways to fight, and saying, not in my name, not in the name of my God and those who fought so hard for these rights, and letting her know there are ways. It may feel impossible, may feel like she's getting paid by everybody but us. She has not held a town hall in over 3 years. She is not representing you, the people who put her there and pay her salary. At the very least, we can let them know so that we can look back and say, I stood line, I blocked this dam. And if you've got more passion and ability or a retirement run group and want to do more, we could talk more offline about that. Because I've seen enough, same as Connie, who I had actually the privilege to meet with, Richard Lugar. These kind of stories exist all over the country, but I hope we can at least say we tried. Sinema had the gall when John Lewis died to post on her social media a selfie with him, calling him my hero. The man who got his skull broken on the bridge at Selma, risking his life at age 24 for the votes she is now blocking, allowing for the fascist takeover to come. She thinks she's going to run for president. She seems that narcissistic. This is true also. Will two parties even be allowed on the ballot in 2024? I am not trying to be over-alarmist or freak anybody out. I am bringing us back into the call of God's transforming love and justice that can actually do something about the crazy making of these headlines. Say, no, Senator. We know some things. There is truth and goodness. Let us name it. You're in the way of it. And in so doing, we are loving our neighbor. There are no obstacles in the way to the ministry. This is the calling of the siblings and hands and feet of Christ. And in so doing, we can, with a much straighter face, honor Dr. King and Brother John Lewis. Good trouble can look like a lot of things. It all starts with just being who you are, though, and then flexing it a little bit. For years, I've heard the words wait, King said. The wait has almost always meant never, because this is the way we've always done things. King adds, I had hoped that the white liberal, he said moderate, but in today's parlance, I'm updating it. I had hoped that the white liberal would understand that laws should exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail to do this, they become dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. Connie Wick was 83 at Robin Run. She tore down dams. She planted seeds for billions and life-saving aid to the poorest of the poor from her community center writing table. And our own senator who dares to profane, our own senator here in Arizona who dares to profane the name, words, and legacies of King and John Lewis while staining everything they stood for, is a dam right now. Our ministry, beloved, is to set no obstacle in any way. The civil rights movement is now. We will remove obstacles to injustice, obstacles to freedom and liberation for many. Can we remove the obstacle of a senator? Of these stairs? Might be time to drive through some red lights, per the quote on the bulletin. Dr. King's daughter, Bernice, said these words and shared them on Twitter yesterday. I want to encourage us. This is King's daughter. I want to encourage us concerning voting rights legislation. There is hope. We have yet to engage as fully as we can. And there are people remaining to be won over to the cause. I know it looks bleak, but lift your heads, spread ways to help, and keep the faith. The Spirit of King is alive. Lift your heads, spread ways to help, keep the faith. Amen. Will you please rise for the singing of God of Change and Glory? changing ways, give us still the grace to pray. Many gifts, one Spirit, one love known in many ways. In our differences, blessing, diversity we praise. One giver, one word, one Spirit, one God, known in many ways. Halloween our days, for the giver, for the gifts, praise, praise, praise. God of many colors, God of many signs, you have made us different, blessing many kinds. As the old ways disappear, let your love cast out our fear. Many gifts, one Spirit, one love known in many ways. In our differences, blessing, diversity we praise. One giver, one word, one Spirit, one God, known in many ways. Halloween our days, for the giver, for the gifts, praise, praise, praise. Richness of the morning, newness of each night, you are still creating endless love and light. This we see as shadows part, many gifts from one great heart. Many gifts, one Spirit, one love known in many ways. In our differences, blessing, diversity we praise. One giver, one word, one Spirit, one God, known in many ways. Halloween our days, for the giver, for the gifts, praise, praise, praise.
Siblings who are and yet becoming as individuals shows God's presence in the world. That divine presence is reflected even more fully, powerfully, and transformatively as we attempt to unite in beloved community as a congregation and in our wider city. Let us bring ourselves, our gifts, and our resources together, and that God may be glorified. The morning offering for sustaining the mission and ministries of Rincon can be placed in the basket in the narthex on your way out. For those online, you may give through our website, rincon.ucc.org. Will you please pray with me? Oh God, we commit to use our gifts, wisdom, knowledge, faith, and healing, working of miracles, prophecy, discernment, administration, hospitality, and finances, in the service of acting as co-workers, and with you and each other, and for peace and justice to flow like a mighty stream.
In spirit, you may rise as you were wanting. Lord, prepare me to be sanctuary, soon holy, tried and true, with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. So where we are a sanctuary, each made holy, loved right through, with thanksgiving, we are a living sanctuary for you. Yes, indeed. Well, for those here and those online, this has been your annual Martin Luther King Jr. service, one that always animates and makes me topsy-turvy inside in the week ahead. And I'll add, as a piece of safe space, may this always feel like a safe space to hold the topsy-turviness while remembering our call as followers of Jesus is comfort the afflicted, afflict the comfortable. This is something I think we can say all with a straight face, and I encourage us to go forth sitting with encouragement, challenge, and encouragement again, that we are held and beloved, seeking rest for our weariness, so that we can continue to manifest God's love, transforming love and justice as comforters of the afflicted and holy afflictors, holy and blessed afflictors of the comfortable. Let us go forth to celebrate and strengthen our inescapable network of mutuality and become the radiant hope needed in the world. As we go forth in this mutuality, may we experience our God rejoicing over us and with us. Let us go forth confident that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Amen. That was beautiful. Oop. Hot mic.